Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next Digital Virtuosity session. Today's presentation will be about the state of the CDP, key findings to help you adapt to the new digital era. This is a presentation about a piece of content that we released on our 2020 State of the CDP research that was all about the current insights and trends that people are taking with CDPs. Today we have an expert panel that is happy to join you, and I'm going to bring down the slides right now so that we can introduce every person on our panel, starting with Nicole Burt. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole Burt. I'm a customer success manager here at Telium. I've been with Telium for 5 years working with some of our large enterprise West Coast customers.
And then let's move to Jay Calavis.
Hi all, Jay Calavis, Chief Innovation Officer here at Telium. I've been here for coming up on 10 years.
And Jamie Wells.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jamie Wells. As Matt mentioned, I am a Director of Solutions Consulting, and I have been at Telium since 2014. So Jay has me beat.
Thanks, everyone. And my name is Matt Parisi. I'll be kind of the MC for today. And let's hop into today's agenda and go over what we will be talking about today. So like I mentioned, we had a 2020 State of the CDP report come out, which was an update from the previous year. So we saw some changes and had some great insights out of that research that we'd love to share. So first, I'll give you an overview of that research, show some of the key findings, and then basically we'll hop into a panel discussion of some of the results from the panel. So first off, wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the state of the market and some of the challenges that companies are facing as it relates to the challenges that CDPs are solving. So as some of you may heard, there have been some recent developments around how we can use data, and specifically how we can use third-party data in third-party cookies. So these cookies crumbling, let's say, have kind of impacted the way that we're able to deliver customer experience and analyze customer experience. So these ways of kind of transferring data from place to place and measuring customer behavior are kind of falling apart, and they're different than what they were before. On top of that, we have increasing privacy regulation that's varied by geography and even by state in the US. So we have these changing rules in place that make data management very difficult. At the same time, we kind of have an elevated attitude from customers around their privacy and expectations around their privacy. Many customers use ad blockers, and you know, their behavior is dominated by what they do on their mobile phone, where third-party cookies already weren't as effective already. And kind of because of all three of those reasons, we see kind of this walled garden expansion where kind of the big players on the scene have increased power within the market because they have the greatest access to data. You know, companies like Facebook and Google, or large publishers where customers spend a lot of their time just engaging on the internet. And this is the backdrop against which we have run this research that we're running. So it's important to keep those forces in mind when we look at the results. And one of the biggest results that kind of came out of the survey was the elevated importance of data collection. So what you'll see here are the top 3 solution areas that are the most important for a CDP to address. And what we have here is number 1 being data collection and privacy. That should stand out to everybody as kind of a big deal, because that's a pretty big difference from number 1 in the past, when growth and customer acquisition have historically topped questions like these in research before. So it's interesting that in an era when kind of easy access to third-party data is going away, all of a sudden focus is shifting to data collection and privacy, because ultimately delivering customer experience is going to be completely dependent on your ability to collect data and have those insights and act with insights. And privacy is kind of one of the things that you have to work with. If you're not able to gain consent from the beginning, that, everything after that becomes much harder for you. So we also asked kind of what are three outcomes, or what are the top outcomes that marketers are looking to drive with tech in 2021? And again, better protections for customer data privacy came out number one, even above faster acquisition of new customers and more personalized communications with customers, which are some of the stalwarts that always top surveys like this. So this is kind of a shift in the market, and something that we're seeing is becoming more important, and something that definitely brands need to plan around. So with that, let's head into a few more of the key findings that we'll actually discuss with the panel here. And the one that I'd like to start with is COVID-19. So we all also may be familiar with a little thing called COVID-19 and the pandemic that hit last year in March. We're about a little over a year beyond when it first onset. And what we're seeing is that CDPs are becoming critical to actually specifically addressing the challenges that marketers see as a result of COVID-19. So here we see the top priorities that became more important after COVID-19, and we see ad spend naturally kind of topping the list, and the kind of the stalwart I mentioned before about acquiring new customers. But I think what kind of stands out to me is number one and number three are all about kind of managing spend across multiple channels and kind of managing behavior across multiple channels. So I'd like to start with Jay here and hop into the first question. Does anything strike you about those priorities in light of what's happening in the market, kind of those trends that we talked about?
Yeah, they make sense. I mean, it's a real pressure cooker out there for marketers right now. We have a pandemic that basically accelerates the need for digital and data transformation by 5 or 10 years. And then, oh, by the way, here comes a huge speed bump right in front of you, which is the changes in regulatory needs across the globe, really. And then, of course, cookies crumbling. And so marketers had to not just augment their plans and find a way to transform more quickly, but also figure out how to navigate these new waters. Walled gardens becoming more prevalent, adaptability to be able to reach their audiences still. And of course, identity being this fleeting concept that you have to now figure out how to manage. Throw in consent management, and it's a jungle out there. And so marketers are really struggling with how to figure out all of these different forces coming in at once, and how to best get themselves ready for the future.
Yep, that combination of identity and data collection is a tough one. So Jamie, seeing that kind of ad spend and managing ad spend across multiple channels is kind of the number one priority out there post COVID. Any advice for those who kind of might share that as a top priority, or any advice in general?
Yeah, advice in general. I wish I had all the answers, but the fact is, there's the COVID forces, and really that caused a lot of companies to freeze their budget, reassess where they're allocating their funds, assess how impactful that will be on their business. And so it makes perfect sense, as Jay mentioned, that this is actually shifted to be a top priority. I have two kind of anecdotal things that happened in my existence as a solutions consultant here at Telium, which is a customer of ours is a retailer, and they actually had set to go live a very tailored campaign focused on bringing your birthday party into their store. And it was something that certainly was top priority until it wasn't, and it was all of a sudden a not top priority. And they had all sorts of campaign management and budget allocation and Telium implementation dedicated to that, which of course had to shift, which was something that grabbed their attention quickly, right? So I would imagine if they were filling out the survey during that time, that would have been the top priority for them. Another one is the market forces that are shifting people from, traditionally behavioral. I say traditionally behavioral, even though that's not even that old, but behavioral advertising to contextual. and shifting from things that are forcing people to go to a physical brick and mortar place to convert to a digital conversion. And one of the financial services companies that I work with had a lot of campaigns that were focused around things that had longer sales cycles and things that required in-person meetings, like a financial services, financial advising or home mortgages. And they shifted to things like loan deferment or something that was, not only was it something that could be satisfied exclusively digital, but it was also something that had to do with the pandemic. And they switched it from behavioral to contextual because of the cookies and because of the measurement. And so it all makes sense. And I wouldn't say that I have advice as much as just, all of those things are market forces that affected everyone from retail to banking.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah. Thinking about the fact, the impact of COVID pushing people just kind of across channels all over the place, right? Like one of the big major channels kind of goes away and kind of all these other channels become more important. Like, were you agile enough to be able to, and was your data foundation agile enough ultimately to move along with the reality of the market? So, with the fact that people kind of shifted like that and businesses needed to shift along with them, Nicole, I'm wondering, you work with a lot of customers. Like, what are some technology trends that companies need to be aware of in this time and plan around with these things happening?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Jay and Jamie. I think marketers were kind of sitting at this challenging intersection back in March where all campaigns had to go digital. They were under increased pressure to make sure online sales were continuing to go up, but then they were under extra scrutiny for media spend. With the changes in kind of reliability of third-party data and cookies, I think we're starting to see a lot more companies moving to server-side implementations, both for customer data as well as event level data. So vendors like Facebook and media vendors are starting to adopt server-side approaches to obtaining that data. And so I think we're starting to see a lot more customers migrate in that direction. Facebook is a leading example, but we'll slowly start to see more vendors adopt that type of implementation.
Yeah, I'd add, Nicole, that along with all of these different forces happening, all of a sudden people really woke up to the fact that first-party data is the only way out of this mess. And some companies were already working towards that nirvana of being focused on first-party data and using it for all their marketing purposes. Others had to pivot quickly. But it's key to find partners that help you unlock your existing and future first-party data in order to handle all of these different things that we just discussed.
Yeah, the shift and more importance of first-party data is an interesting trend as well. I've seen a lot of activity around there and a lot of different strategies actually because of the uncertain nature of kind of what the solution is gonna look like out, in 2022 ultimately. Why don't we shift gears a little bit and go on to the next finding here. So what we have here is we basically see that 89% of marketers in the top left there, 89% of marketers said they will spend more on tech in 2021. And actually, if you read the report, you'll actually see that almost 32% will actually spend significantly more. So I'm wondering, let's see here from Jamie. Where have you seen companies beefing up their abilities with tech? Like, where are they making investments?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it seems counterintuitive, right? In the sense that people are freezing budgets because of COVID and things like that. But it actually makes sense when you step through it, because that reevaluation that took place because of, and other market forces too, but the pandemic certainly affected this, where they said, hey, let's get lean where we can. It came to be a realization that, we're actually, where we need to invest is in our digital. Let's take this digital transformation buzzword seriously and look at how we can actually re-architect in order to do things better and to do things, long term in a way that's sustainable and our business is going to be successful. So I think that's how this happened, is people took a look where and said, hey, let's get lean where we can. And then they realized, oh, actually, this is something that we require some investment in order to, ensure our success in the future. That's number one. The other one is, companies, and this dovetails into that notion of first party data, but companies are trying desperately to go from a reactive state to a proactive state with respect to churn and adoption and and all of and people purchasing their products, whatever their product may happen to be, right? So that's where I think they've made an investment in getting faster with processing, as well as an investment in machine learning to say, let's try to proactively predict some of these things as we can, and then let's activate on that prediction as fast as possible. And that's, that's definitely not an easy task. So people are looking at, investing in those things. That's what I've seen. The other part of this is the trend that we've seen in a million different ways, and that's the notion of the ability to purchase demographic data and install that demographic data and then market against that purchased information is increasingly less available. And so now we have to re-architect in a way that says, what is our first party data? How can we get our hands around that? And then how can we deliver that first party data in a privacy-centric way to a system that has advertising inventory or has reach to people on the internet in order to successfully market our products and do that in such a way that the old way of doing it is no longer available, and that also takes investment. So that's what I've seen as a trend.
Cool. So that's like the trend overall, Jay. What do you think specific to kind of CDP land? Like how do you see CDP investments increasing, and for, what are people trying to do? We just went over some of the priorities. So
yeah. So just to add on to what Jamie mentioned, it's funny because that reevaluation of spend did occur across the board in MarTech. And you'd think that in the tag management space specifically, there are free options. You would have thought that market would have been impacted for us, but it actually got much better for us because, data collection and management and infrastructure is front and center. In order to create a first party data strategy, you have to have that framework. Now, add on to that, this notion of a force multiplier, which is what a CDP should be. It should be an infrastructure that allows you to plug in your existing tech, no matter what it is, and have all those systems work harmoniously together, creating a better environment for your team to collaborate and to have that single version of the marketable truth based on first party data to go forth and employ all of these different strategies that now you have to put in place. So the CDP is the catalyst to help all of these companies leapfrog and move into the future quickly. By having a system that already uses your existing tech, you don't have to rip a bunch of stuff out and go buy new tech. I think that's why you're seeing the independent CDP market just thrive in this market. And some of the other more closed solutions struggle to find traction.
That is an excellent point and a great segue into the next topic, which is all about actually integration. What we saw in the study is that marketers strongly agree that, or 53% of marketers strongly agree that their MarTech stacks are walled gardens themselves. So their own stacks are basically hard. They agreed that we're hard to connect solutions together and make solutions work together. And then what we also see is that 62% of marketers here in the on the right side, 62% of marketers say it's difficult to integrate new third-party solutions, which if we hop to the next slide here and look at how important integration has become, comparing our 2020 results to 2021 results, we saw that integration with more third-party solutions is basically the number one thing this year, and was the number 4 thing last year that organizations are seeking improvement around from their CDP specifically. So what I'm wondering is, whoops, I'm sorry, Nicole, if marketers are looking to get kind of more out of their stack, how do they avoid the lengthy integration process? Like what are some tips that marketers out there could use to make their stack, work better together?
Yeah, I think this really goes back to when you're kind of evaluating what CDP makes sense for your organization, looking for that vendor neutrality is going to be really important. Back in 2019, 2020, we saw all the big cloud companies coming in with their version of the CDP. And those big cloud companies are kind of built a lot of times through acquisition. So a lot of those technologies don't inherently kind of talk to each other. So even when you're kind of buying into this concept of a CDP within a big cloud, it doesn't necessarily mean that those downstream technologies you already use will necessarily integrate cohesively. So my advice to companies who are still kind of in the evaluation stage or looking for the right CDP is really to look under the hood, ask to see integration documentation, get a better sense of the depth and breadth of each integration that you're going to want to use. Selecting a vendor who is vendor neutral will give you some options down the road too. For example, we at Telium have a large engineering team, but we have a specialized kind of engineering arm who's focused on developing, maintaining those integrations. So just because you might use one ESP today, you definitely want to have the flexibility if that changes down the road. So my advice would definitely be evaluate for vendor neutrality, and ask to see that documentation. I think the vendor you're going to work with and partner with long-term should be really transparent about that with you.
So I'm going to skip to the end here, and we're going to go over kind of our Q&A session. We're going to focus on a little round robin question here. There are so many CDPs out there. Why, number one, and how do you narrow them down? So each person on the panel has a super unique perspective. Jamie being kind of on the technical solution side, Jay being our chief innovation officer and having his eyes to the future, and Nicole having so much experience with all of our customers. I'm super curious. Let's start with Jay. Why are there so many CDPs, and how do you pick between them?
Yeah, so it's our fault. We're sorry. When we built Audience Stream, we didn't build a CDP. We built a system to solve a problem, which is how great new technology is born. And we solved it by creating a first-party infrastructure that allowed you to centralize and then democratize data across your MarTech stack. Well, the CDP Institute then was created, and all these vendors basically self-qualified into a loosely defined definition of what a CDP should be doing. And it allowed a lot of vendors who had different origin stories, so they were serving other purposes, to qualify into this now hodgepodge of a market. I think there's over 200 offerings out there. So everybody jump in the pool and all hang out. And now the market has to kind of figure out how to better segment out the types of CDPs. And we're seeing that happen. Cohorts of CDPs are now competing against each other because they're going back to that genesis of where they came from in the first place. Some are doing product recommendations, other were born as customer experience management tools or A/B testing and personalization, whatever it might be. They're finding their way kind of back to where they're going. And we, of course, we were born in data. We invented the data layer. And so we were always a first-party data infrastructure. And that's where we live. And we compete against vendors that serve that purpose as well. And so, of course, the moral of the story here is know what it is you're trying to accomplish, and that will bring you to the type of CDP that will serve you best.
Cool. And sometimes the two CDPs might be under one roof. So Nicole, have you ever seen that happen, or what's your kind of perspective on this?
Yeah, that definitely happens a lot. I feel like where I sit working with existing customers, they often already have a couple CDPs, and Telium happens to be one of them under that label. So I think where myself and my team kind of come in is taking off that label, better understanding how our customers are leveraging these other CDPs and figuring out, are they truly competitive, or really do we all have kind of different strengths, and where do we fit together? How can we help take a use case from ideation to actually activation, leveraging these different technologies?
And
yeah, Matt, I've seen 3 actually. We have a client
wow.
that we share with 2 other CDPs, and everyone serves their purpose, and we get along great.
And then Jamie, from kind of the perspective of someone who's putting together kind of these solutions and architecting them together, what's your perspective?
It's similar to Nicole's actually, because I mean, you know, the solution design process starts with my group, and taking the label off is certainly a good move, right? There's a software that was developed that you're using, you find it useful. Let's look at those. Let's look at those purposes, and then let's center our focus that way, and less about the label of they're calling themselves a customer data platform. Do we really need both, right? Because it becomes very apparent that there are a lot of ways to Jay's point, there are a lot of ways to manage customer data in a software as a service platform. And so that name is probably purposefully vague, right? But at the same time, requires some looking under the hood a little bit. So when I start to evaluate things under the hood, it all becomes very clear, and often it becomes a nice cohesive architecture with 2 or 3 systems that call themselves a CDP to achieve, you know, the business objectives, the companies that we work with.
You know, Jamie, the best example of that is Salesforce bought a CDP called Evergage, immediately ripped the label off and knew exactly what it is and the purpose it was going to have in their platform, which was a personalization engine, which is where it came from. Great example where, you know, everyone kind of leans in because there's a lot of momentum in this market. But in reality, all these tools, they're all viable tools, but they all come from different places.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I thought, Jamie, one thing you said at the end there that was a good piece of advice is kind of starting with the use case and working backwards and figuring out what you need, you know, system wise and strategy wise to make that happen. So cool. Well, I think that was an amazing panel, amazing discussion. If you do want to see the full report, we do have the full State of CDP report available on Telium.com for download. Other than that, thank you for joining us. Thank you to our panel for weighing in on kind of what they're seeing from each of their unique perspectives. And thank you for everyone joining. We'll see you at the next round of DV sessions.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
Matt.
Bye.
Bye.